to some extent reacquainted over the time. Again, as was mentioned, there were the provider meetings. People used to get together and network. I think this is a little bit of an opportunity to do that, sort of learn a little bit about the Alliance and see how we can best help the participants that we're all here for. So again, my name is Brian Stein. I'm here to talk about the Alliance of TBI and NHTD Waiver Providers. First, I just want to give a little bit of general info about the waiver program. I think most of you here, it sounds like, are providers or are in the process of becoming providers. Some of you, however, are newer providers, and you may not sort of have that background yet or the detail yet that may come with being a provider over many, many years. I think one of the things that you can sort of see about the waivers, you probably know who we service, right? Primarily we service as home care providers, which is what most of us in the room are, not all of us, but most of us are home care providers here. So we're providing primarily to people with cognitive impairments, whether that be from a brain injury or that be from dementia or some other type of cognitive impairment. That's pretty much the pool of participants that we service. And the program, has existed since the 90s. And one of the things you sort of see through the sort of lens of time, if you will, of, working on this program for so many years is the more things change, the more it stays the same. And so there have always been threats of various kinds to the program, both existential threats that threaten the very ability of the program to continue existing in its current state or perhaps at all. And then there's been other minor threats. You might think about things like inadequate rates, right? So those things have happened, and I think that's one of the important things of the Alliance. It's a group of providers who do the same thing that you are doing now, serving this very vulnerable population, and we are working, in collaboration with other stakeholders to provide the best quality services and be able to help all of us as providers continue to do that on an ongoing basis. Okay, so again, some of the threats we think about, and there are, the big one probably on everyone's mind in the last year has to be COI, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that later. Some of you may have questions, and certainly we can take some, general questions. I don't know that I have all the answers about COI, but, certainly we can take those questions at the end. Did it go to the next? Okay, there we go. Who is the Alliance, right? The Alliance is a not-for-profit organization. Again, we are mostly waiver provider organizations. There are both, LICSs, which is the vast majority of providers who are currently on the Alliance, but there are also a bunch of agencies that do not provide home care. They are service coordination only providers. They're providing ILST and PBIS, day programs, of course. So again, all are welcome, but at the moment, we do have perhaps a preponderance, if you will, of LICSs. So, generally, what do we do? And I think, you might gather from the name, that we organize and advocate on behalf of providers, okay? And so we're looking to support all the stakeholders, and it does include the participants, right? So we will work, as providers to support the participants, but without us being here and being here in a strong capacity, being able to provide services with adequate rates, with adequate regulations, then the whole program itself is potentially endangered. So it's important that we all kind of work together to support the population and remain healthy ourselves. One of the sort of important things, I guess, a recurring theme, if you will, sort of the presentation is the continuity of the program, right? Over time, again, there have been threats. I mentioned that before. You can talk about COI now. You can talk about rates. You can talk about the, threat of, I don't know, a threat, but the talk of rolling the waiver program into managed care. These things have all happened over time, and those of us in the room who I recognize who have been around the waiver program, probably about as long as I have, if not longer, know these things, and we've seen these things come and go. Another, sort of common theme is, agencies coming and going, and I think that's an important thing. I think agencies that don't have the support they need find it more difficult to stay in the program for any number of reasons. Back in the early 2000s, there were many, many agencies that were a part of the program. and it sort of, faded away. Many of them faded away, and the program became much smaller. And more recently, there's been a lot more interest in the program, and it has grown quite a bit again, the number of providers. But in order to keep our provider population stable, we need to work together. We need to advocate together on behalf of the program. And again, in numbers, there is strength. So, how do we do this? Excuse me, I skip to the next slide. Thank you. We work collaboratively to increase awareness of the program, and it's important to remember when we think about, these programs, many of you are home care providers, MLTC, your average MLTC program, if you think of the big ones, may have 50,000 or more members. They're very large. It's a very big program. The TBI and NHTD waiver programs combined are 7,000 people or less across the state of New York. There are more of them sort of in the downstate region than are upstate, but again, it's a very small program. So we do need to increase awareness about the program itself, and that includes not just with the population and getting more people on the program, but it also includes with the representatives, it includes with the departments that oversee this program. Okay. Another thing that's important is to sort of think about cost effectiveness, and we have to talk about how can we cost effectively provide these rates. That is one of our mandates under the 1915C waiver program, right? The NHTD and TBI waivers are what they call 1915C waiver programs. We are federally required to have cost effectiveness. So if you think about the federal mandates under the program, we can't just raise rates. It would be great in a perfect world if we could all get paid $45 an hour for home care and $1,000 a month for service coordination, so we could hire the best people and provide the best quality care. However, there are some realities to the program itself, and of course, we need to manage all of this. And so, again, working with the Alliance, we work with the representatives, we work with the Department of Health, we'll work with both local and federal representatives to make sure that the program is healthy, and that includes on both sides, right? The rates need to be appropriate for us to continue to provide care, and it needs to be appropriate for the program itself to continue to exist as it does. I mean, there is concern, of course, that we go above what's called, the daily rate, for those of you who are in the know of that, and if we exceed that number, the program, could potentially be, perhaps not endangered, but there could be, significant concerns regarding the program's ongoing ability to accept new people. Again, so we talk about cost-effective care. We try to educate people at the Department of Health and the Department of Budget, what is potentially an appropriate rate for, for our programs. It's not always clear that, they have the information necessary, and we probably all dealt with cost reports here. We know those cost reports do not necessarily effectively reflect our expenses and our costs and to provide care to this population. So that is part of what we do. We also talk to them about the value. What is our value, right? There is the value of keeping people out of the nursing facility, and that is, sort of required under the Olmstead Act, and it's part of the 1915C waiver in and of itself. Okay, so one of the things that I've heard over time when I've talked to various agencies, about the Alliance and potentially joining the Alliance is collaboration versus conflict. We all know that we all sort of work at with the good graces, if you will, of the Department of Health, of the local RDCs, of various other regulatory agencies. And so, the Alliance is very, very careful to work in collaboration and not in conflict with these agencies. We're extremely careful about that, so I do want to allay anyone's concerns about that. So we will work with CMS. We will work with the New York State and federal representatives I mentioned before, the New York Governor's Office as appropriate. Of course, we are working with Department of Health, and we do maintain open and continuous communication with them, especially the waiver team, and of course, Department of Budget as it pertains to appropriate rate setting. Just gonna got me 2 slides behind. Okay. I think I went 2 slides too far. Okay, so So it's, again, important to have stability, right? Without it, our agencies won't thrive and grow, and without that, the program won't thrive and grow and potentially wither away. So one of the things that we do is we work to make sure there are qualified providers. We try to educate providers. We try to make sure that the regulations in place for the providers are appropriate and can help all of us continue to provide quality services for these participants. And without these stable providers, with the constant change of providers, it's much more difficult for these participants to be able to stay in the community itself. So who are our partners? How do we do this? So we do work with advocacy partners at both the state and federal level. At the federal level, we work at the ML Strategies. It is a rather large federal advocacy organization. I know some people call them lobbyists in the old terms, but I think they prefer not to use that term now. So we do work directly with the EVP and the Senior VP of ML Strategies. We do have weekly calls to them. Nick sits with me on those Zoom calls weekly, and we're able to, hopefully get some change effectuated, for what we need at the federal level. Locally, we do work with B&W, Brown and Weinrob. Many of you may know them. They're probably the preeminent advocacy organization in the Department of Health space in New York State. And we do work with one of their partners, Carolyn Kerr, and other senior staff there. And so I just want to go to our next slide here. So what have been our accomplishments, right? First of all, the program is still here. Without the Alliance, and again, I've been part of the Alliance almost since its inception, the program likely would not be here at this point, and certainly not in the way that it is currently, providing good quality care. So first of all, just being here in and of itself is an accomplishment, because there have been, again, as I mentioned before, one of the themes is continuity. There have been multiple threats over time to the program. We have, as the Alliance, been able to work on many of these sort of, concerns. Perhaps not threat is always the right term, but FIDA, CFCO, these are great programs, but they may not necessarily be the appropriate services for our participants, or at least they can present an option for sure, but they should not be the only option for our participants. Then there's the managed care carve-in. We were supposed to be carved into managed care numerous times. As you may know, we're currently excluded till I believe it's 2026 at the moment. We are working on extending that. I think many of us who provide these services would agree, although managed long-term care is a great set of services for people, it is perhaps not the most appropriate services for our participants and what they need and the specialized care they require. Again, during COVID, we were able to get telehealth services going, and we were able to get the ongoing changes for service coordination, which I think has been helpful for all of us. And then there's COI, and I know many people may be a bit disappointed in what happened with COI, but I'd like to emphasize that COI was supposed to happen many, many years prior to its actual implementation, and the implementation was slated to be significantly different than it is now, or that it has happened now. So it's important to keep that in mind, that to some extent that we did have a success there. And then finally, rates. It all boils down to rates. Without appropriate rates, we cannot provide the proper care. We have avoided the rate cuts in the waiver program that have come to many of the managed cares, that have come to many other programs. There have been significant rate cuts of several different levels, and we have avoided those. Additionally, more recently, many of you did receive rate increases. Those rate increases were for service coordination across the board, as well as other services. Then the upstate, essentially other than New York City, HCSS providers did receive a rate. New York City HCSS providers, we are still working towards achieving that goal and educating the Department of Budget, on the need for that. So, we have some top priorities today. I think I'll quickly go through that slide here since we're running a little behind. We're working through some of these things. One of those would be, of course, helping people get out of nursing facilities. There are many people in nurse facilities that are there simply because of housing issues. There's the continued carve out from managed long-term care. There are a few other things I'm working on. So why would you get involved? Again, in powers, there's number. You can increase your representation. We can get more done together than we can individually. You can also receive education. The Alliance does provide education about various changes to the program, about regulatory issues. They provide information, and you can take part in, phone calls, emails, that take place on both the group level, and certainly if you need individual assistance, that can happen as well as needed. And then, of course, there's always networking, and we do have our annual conference coming up. I know I'm at one conference promoting another, but it is November 20th, 2024, up in Saratoga Springs. So DOH, I believe Thomas Reese is coming. OMIG, I believe, is coming, as they usually do. And there'll be some, things about other potential, threats to the program, right? The 80-20 rule. How does that impact you as a provider? Which, of course, depends to some extent on what type of provider you are. So I think that's it for me. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask? Yes. The meeting is November 20th, 2024 in Saratoga Springs. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Oh, yes. So sorry about that. I should have put up the slide. That's my. Let's see if I can see this. That would and. Okay. Well, we have the names of the board members. Hopefully this is going to go to the right thing. That's about Tracy Allen. So Tracy Allen is the main point person, and you can reach out to Tracy Allen. Her email, her phone number is up there. She's going to be the person that will work with you to become enrolled at whatever level. And I should mention, again, that you're taking part in the Alliance, and the cost to you is dependent on the size of your agency. So smaller agencies are not overly unnecessarily burdened. One slide back? No, maybe one more. There we go. All right. Yes, I will work with them to have the slides shared out by email. All right. Thank you. Thank you.